The biting wind of the Russian steppe howled its relentless dirge, a mournful song that had become the soundtrack to the Wehrmacht's grim advance. It was late autumn of 1941, and the initial exhilarating rush of Operation Barbarossa had congealed into a brutal, grinding slog. The roads, once mere tracks of baked earth, had become quagmires under the relentless rains, then frozen ruts of impassable ice. For the men of the German army, the enemy wasn't just the resolute Red Army. It was the vast, unforgiving expanse of Russia itself. Sergeant Klaus Richter, a grizzled veteran whose face was a roadmap of forgotten battles, squinted through the swirling dust. His unit, a reconnaissance detachment, was attempting to maintain contact with the advancing panzer divisions, a task that grew more impossible with each passing mile. His trusted Kübelwagen, a marvel of German automotive engineering, struggled valiantly. Its air-cooled engine, a sophisticated flat-four derived from the Volkswagen Beetle project, hummed with precise efficiency. Its lightweight, rear-wheel drive design, coupled with excellent ground clearance, made it adept on rough terrain at least, on European rough terrain. But Russia was different. The mud here seemed to possess a malevolent sentience, eager to swallow any vehicle whole. The Kübelwagen, for all its German ingenuity, was proving susceptible. Klaus watched his young mechanic, Gefreiter Hans Vogel, meticulously checking the ignition system for moisture, his brow furrowed with concentration. Hans was a prodigy with engines, a man who could hear a faulty valve from 100 paces. He embodied the German ideal, precision, dedication, and an almost reverent respect for machinery. For Hans, every bolt, every gear, every spark plug was a testament to the superiority of German engineering. Their machines were not just tools, they were extensions of German genius, meticulously crafted, robust, and utterly reliable provided they received the care and attention they deserved. "Another misfire, Hans?" Klaus asked, his voice rough with fatigue. Hans straightened, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. "Ja, Sergeant. The damp is getting into the distributor cap again, and the fuel lines, they are not happy with this low-grade Soviet petrol." He sighed, a rare display of frustration. "It is not built for this abuse, Sergeant. It is too fine a machine for such conditions." Klaus nodded. He understood. Their vehicles were like highly trained war horses, thoroughbreds requiring careful grooming and specialized feed. They performed magnificently when treated correctly, but faltered when subjected to the crude realities of total war on the Eastern Front. Spare parts were increasingly scarce, the supply lines stretched thin as violin strings. A single broken component could immobilize a vehicle for days, even weeks, reducing a vital asset to a stationary hulk. This was the prevailing mindset in the Wehrmacht: quality over quantity, precision over expediency. Every tank, every truck, every staff car was a testament to the finest metallurgical and mechanical minds in Europe. They were designed for durability, for performance, for a level of engineering excellence that, in theory, made them invincible. But the sprawling, mud-choked battlefields of the East were rapidly exposing the Achilles heel of this philosophy. Then came the reports, vague at first, whispers carried on the wind from the southern sectors, from the British and American fronts in North Africa, and increasingly from the Russian front itself, especially after the influx of Lend-Lease aid. Reports of a new American vehicle, a small, strange contraption. The first direct encounter for Klaus' unit came during a brutal winter thaw in early 1942. They were attempting to salvage a disabled Sund Kfz 251 half-track from a particularly treacherous patch of mud. The engine of their recovery truck, an Opel Blitz, coughed and sputtered, its drive wheels spinning uselessly. Spirits were low, exhaustion was high. Suddenly, a distant, high-pitched whine grew louder. Over a snow-drifted rise, something small and boxy appeared. It moved with an almost comical bounce, splashing through the slush, seemingly unhindered by the terrain that had brought their half-track to a halt. It was painted in an olive-drab color, unfamiliar and stark against the white landscape. As it drew closer, Klaus could make out its basic, almost crude shape. 4 open seats, a simple grille, exposed fenders. It looked less like a military vehicle and more like a farmer's utility cart. "What in the name of all that is holy is that?" Klaus muttered, shielding his eyes. Hans, ever the engineer, peered intently. "An American vehicle, Sergeant. I have seen sketches in intelligence reports. They call it a Jeep." He spat the word out, as if it tasted strange on his tongue. The Jeep pulled up a respectful distance away, its engine chugging with a rhythmic, almost agricultural beat. 2 American soldiers, bundled in heavy winter gear, regarded them with cautious curiosity. A standoff, silent and tense, hung in the frigid air. Eventually, the Americans, seeing the half-track hopelessly stuck, made a series of gestures, offering to help. Klaus, his pride warring with his desperation, finally nodded. What choice did he have? The 2 American GIs, with surprising efficiency, produced a tow rope, a thick, simple length of hemp, and attached it to the front of their Jeep. Klaus' men, meanwhile, had been struggling with thick steel cables and complex winches on their Opel, which now stood inert. The American Jeep's driver revved the engine. The little vehicle dug its tires into the mud, strained, and with a surprisingly powerful tug, began to pull. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, the massive half-track shifted. Then, with a lurch and a grunt from the Jeep's engine, the Stokevsekos 251 was free, dragged onto firmer ground. Klaus and Hans watched, dumbfounded. A single, small, seemingly primitive vehicle had accomplished what their larger, more sophisticated Opel Blitz and a squad of men could not. "Impossible," Hans whispered, his eyes wide. "It is too small. The engine cannot have such torque, but it had, and it had done it. This wasn't an isolated incident. As the war raged on, these Jeeps began to appear everywhere. They were in the deserts of North Africa, ferrying commanders and supplies. They were tearing across the fields of Italy, dodging artillery fire. And most disturbingly for the Wehrmacht, they were now ubiquitous on the Eastern Front. A constant, irritating presence, ferrying anything and everything. German intelligence reports, initially dismissive, began to change tone. Early assessments had described the Jeep as a crude, unsophisticated vehicle, lacking the fine engineering of German designs. But the field reports painted a different picture. Commanders were noting its exceptional cross-country capability, its remarkable reliability, and its astonishing simplicity of repair. For the German mechanics, these reports were unsettling. They were men trained in a philosophy that equated complexity with quality, precision with superiority. Their machines were often over-engineered, designed to operate at the peak of performance within narrow, controlled parameters. The Panther tank, for example, was a mechanical marvel, but its sophisticated transmission and engine were notoriously delicate, requiring extensive maintenance and specialized expertise. The Tiger, a beast of a machine, demanded constant attention from its crew and a dedicated maintenance team. The German military-industrial complex was a pyramidal structure focused on producing specialized high-performance machines for specific roles. There was no concept of a truly general-purpose vehicle that could perform a multitude of tasks with equal, if not superior, efficacy to their own specialized designs. The Kübelwagen was good for reconnaissance, the Schwimmwagen for amphibious operations, the Kettenkrad for towing in rough terrain. Each was a master of its niche. The Jeep, however, seemed to defy this categorization. It was a reconnaissance vehicle, a staff car, a light troop transport, a tow vehicle, an ambulance, a mobile radio station, even, incredibly, a weapons platform, mounting machine guns or recoilless rifles. It was the mechanical equivalent of a Swiss Army knife, endlessly adaptable, remarkably resilient. Hans Vogel, now a seasoned mechanic and responsible for a small repair depot near Smolensk in 1943, had seen dozens of captured Jeeps by now. His initial disdain had slowly morphed into a grudging respect, and then into a gnawing unease. He would spend hours poring over the captured vehicles, dismantling their engines, examining their chassis. "Look at this, Carl," Hans said to a junior mechanic, pointing to the Jeep's simple four-cylinder engine. No complicated superchargers, no intricate fuel injection, just a simple carburetor, robust valves. It's agricultural. Carl, a young man who had grown up revering the mighty Mercedes-Benz engines, scoffed. "Yes, but it cannot compare to the engineering of our BMWs, can it, Hans?" "It's so crude." "Crude, perhaps," Hans conceded, turning a wrench with ease on a readily accessible spark plug. "But it works, and when it breaks, which is less often than you might think, you can fix it with these." He held up a standard wrench and a screwdriver. No special tools, no complex diagnostic equipment, just simple mechanics. This was the revelation that was beginning to rock the foundations of German mechanical pride. The American philosophy was becoming painfully clear. Build it simply, build it ruggedly, and build it so that anyone can fix it. The German approach, while producing technically superior machines in many aspects, was creating a logistical nightmare. Every component, from a tank's road wheel to a truck's carburetor, was often unique to its specific model and manufacturer. A broken part meant waiting for a replacement from the exact factory that produced it, often hundreds, even thousands of kilometers away. And in the chaos of war, with bombed factories and disrupted supply lines, those waits could be fatal. The Jeep, on the other hand, was a product of a different worldview. The American industrial machine, fueled by a consumer culture that valued widespread availability and ease of use, had perfected the art of mass production and standardization long before the war. Millions of identical parts rolled off assembly lines, all interchangeable. A Ford-built Jeep part would fit perfectly into a Willys-built Jeep. This was not just convenience. It was a revolutionary concept in military logistics. "They don't build them for perfection, Carl," Hans explained, his voice low. "They build them for numbers, for speed of production, and for ease of repair in the field." He gestured to the simple, bolted-together chassis of the Jeep. "Our Quibelwagen has a finely engineered chassis, meticulously welded, balanced. But if a frame member bends badly, it's a factory job. This? You can bash it with a hammer, straighten it out, and it will still drive." The young mechanic looked skeptical. "But that is not engineering, Hans. That is brute force." "Indeed," Hans replied, a grim smile playing on his lips. "And in this war, Carl, brute force often wins, especially when combined with simplicity." This was the slow, painful realization dawning upon the German technical corps. Their meticulous, almost artisanal approach to engineering, while producing masterpieces of precision, was proving to be a handicap in the face of America's industrial might and its radically different pragmatic philosophy. The Jeep, in its utilitarian simplicity, was not just a vehicle, it was a symbol, a stark and undeniable testament to a new way of waging war, a war of logistics, of quantity, and of unyielding battlefield-ready resilience. The dust of Russia and the sands of Africa were slowly, inexorably, grinding away at the bedrock of German engineering pride, replacing it with a creeping sense of dread and a dawning, unwelcome respect for the humble, ubiquitous Jeep. The war machine was a hungry beast, demanding fuel, men, and, crucially, materiel. In the heart of the Third Reich, the gears of industry ground ceaselessly, churning out tanks, artillery, aircraft, and a vast array of specialized vehicles. German engineers, revered as artisans of steel and precision, labored with an almost religious fervor. Each component was meticulously designed, often over-engineered, to achieve optimal performance within its specific parameters. The goal was perfection, a flawless execution of concept into metal. Consider the Quebelwagen, Germany's ubiquitous light utility vehicle. It was an ingenious design, sharing many components with the civilian Volkswagen Beetle. Its air-cooled engine was a marvel of efficiency, capable of operating in extreme temperatures. Its lightweight body and excellent ground clearance made it surprisingly agile off-road. Yet, it was, at its core, a tailored instrument. Its rear-wheel drive, while adequate on firm ground, struggled in deep mud or snow. Its open-top design, while offering excellent visibility, provided little protection from the elements. And critically, its parts, while robust, were specific to the Volkswagen ecosystem. A broken axle or a seized gearbox often required a specialized factory-sourced replacement, necessitating a lengthy journey through an increasingly strained logistical network. Across the Atlantic, a different philosophy had taken root, one born not from military doctrine, but from the demands of a burgeoning consumer society. American industry had, by the 1930s, perfected the art of mass production on an unprecedented scale. Henry Ford's assembly lines had become legendary, but the principles extended far beyond cars. Standardization, interchangeability of parts, and ease of assembly were the bedrock of American manufacturing. The goal was not individual perfection, but collective efficiency, the ability to churn out millions of identical functional items at an astounding rate. When the call for a new general-purpose vehicle came in 1940, the American auto industry responded with characteristic speed and pragmatism. Willys Overland, Ford, and Bantam all submitted prototypes, but the core design principles were strikingly similar. Simple, rugged, four-wheel drive, and capable of performing a multitude of tasks. The result was the Willys MB, soon to be mass-produced by both Willys and Ford as the Jeep. Oberleutnant Karl Zimmermann, a sharp-minded logistics officer attached to a Panzergrenadier division in France, 1944, had a captured Jeep in his motor pool. He often found himself observing his mechanics, men like Hans Vogel, now promoted to a more senior role in repair and recovery, as they worked on it. The contrast with their own vehicles was stark. "Look at this engine block, Hans," Karl said one sweltering afternoon, gesturing to the Jeep's Go Devil engine. "It's primitive, almost agricultural in its simplicity. Our Opel Blitz engines are intricate, refined. This looks like something from a tractor." Hans, sweat dripping from his brow as he expertly swapped a spark plug on the Jeep, grunted in agreement. "Indeed, Herr Oberleutnant. But that is its strength. There are no delicate tolerances to maintain, no complex adjustments required. It just runs, and runs, and runs." He tapped a wrench against the simple cast-iron block. "If a piston seize in our Opel, it is a major overhaul, often requiring removal of the engine block, new linings, specific tools. A multi-day job? This? With a spare engine in a crate, 2 men could replace the entire unit in a few hours. The mounting points are identical. The wiring loom is simple. It's like a child's building toy." Karl frowned. "But is that not crude engineering? Are we to sacrifice precision for expediency?" Hans paused, looking up, his eyes reflecting a hard-earned wisdom. "In the field, Herr Oberleutnant, expediency is often life itself. I have seen our finest vehicles, magnificent machines, sit dead for weeks because one tiny, specialized component was damaged, and the supply lines could not deliver it. A broken headlight on a Quibelwagen requires a specific German-made unit. A broken headlight on this, he patted the Jeep, could be replaced with almost anything that fits and connects to a wire. This was the crux of the German disillusionment. They were producing bespoke suits for war, perfectly tailored but difficult to repair if torn. The Americans were producing durable, mass-market overalls, easily patched and replaced. The interchangeable parts philosophy was a revelation, and a painful one. Imagine a German field workshop in 1943. A commander's Quibelwagen needs a new starter motor. The mechanic checks his inventory. He has a starter motor for an Opel Blitz, one for a Mercedes staff car, perhaps even one for a motorcycle. But the specific starter for the Quibelwagen, made by Siemens or Bosch, is missing. He sends a requisition up the chain. Days turn into weeks. The vehicle remains immobile. Now, imagine an American motor pool. A Jeep needs a new starter motor. The mechanic grabs one from a crate. It fits. Instantly. Because every starter motor for every Jeep, whether manufactured by Willys or Ford, was designed to be identical and fully interchangeable. The simplicity was profound, the logistical advantage immense. It meant fewer unique spare parts to stock, fewer skilled technicians required for complex repairs, and dramatically reduced downtime for vital vehicles. Hans had also observed the driving styles. German drivers, accustomed to the precision and delicacy of their vehicles, drove with a certain reverence. American drivers, often fresh from farms or factories, drove their Jeeps with a brutal, almost careless abandon. They bounced over rocks, plunged through streams, and pushed the little vehicles to their absolute limits. And the Jeeps, astonishingly, took it. They treat them like beasts of burden, Hans once remarked to Karl, watching a captured film reel of American troops. No respect for the machinery. Yet it endures. It's almost as if it's designed to be abused. Indeed, that was precisely the design intent. The Jeep was not built to be pampered. It was built to survive. Its robust leaf spring suspension, its simple beam axles, and its sturdy ladder frame were overbuilt for their size, capable of withstanding incredible punishment. Its low center of gravity and excellent four-wheel drive system allowed it to traverse terrain that would leave many larger, more sophisticated vehicles bogged down. The German engineers, witnessing this firsthand, began to catalog the Jeep's crude advantages. Simple, high-torque engine. The Go Devil was not powerful by German standards, but it delivered excellent torque at low RPMs, perfect for off-road climbing and pulling. Its low compression ratio made it tolerant of varying fuel qualities. Four-wheel drive. A standard feature from the outset, giving it unparalleled traction. German vehicles often relied on specialized half-tracks for similar mobility. Lightweight and compact, easy to transport even by air, and capable of navigating narrow tracks or dense forests. Open design. While offering little protection, it made ingress/egress quick, visibility excellent, and repairs easy. Standardized electrical system. 6-volt, simple, and reliable. Robust drivetrain. Overbuilt for its power, capable of handling significant abuse. These observations led to a growing frustration within the German technical services. They prided themselves on their meticulous design process, their rigorous testing, their pursuit of engineering excellence. Yet here was a vehicle, seemingly devoid of their cherished qualities, outperforming their own creations in the chaotic, unforgiving realities of the battlefield. Generals and staff officers began to demand answers. Why were their expensive, complex vehicles breaking down so frequently, while the enemy's simple devil car seemed indestructible? Why did their repair depots overflow with immobile machines while the Americans kept rolling? The truth was a bitter pill to swallow. German industrial capacity, while formidable, was geared towards producing high-quality, often low-volume, specialized equipment. They excelled at prototypes, at bespoke solutions. The concept of designing for mass production, for interchangeability across vast numbers of units, was not ingrained in their industrial psyche in the same way it was in America. Even their attempts to create equivalent vehicles were hampered by this philosophy. The Kübelwagen, while good, lacked four-wheel drive. The Schwimmwagen, an amphibious variant, was a masterpiece of specialized engineering, but far too complex and expensive to be a truly general-purpose vehicle. The Kettenkrad, a half-track motorcycle, was incredibly capable off-road, but slow, limited in cargo capacity, and a logistical nightmare with its track system. None achieved the versatility, simplicity, and sheer numbers of the Jeep. Hans Vogel, now running a larger recovery unit in the Ardennes in late 1944, watched a captured Jeep being stripped for parts. He held a simple stamped steel fender in his hands. No complex curves, no elaborate bracing. Just a functional piece of metal. This, he mused to his team, is not just a fender, it is a symbol of how they make war, of how we made war. His voice was tinged with a melancholy that spoke of a deeper understanding, a realization that went beyond mere mechanics. The Jeep was more than a vehicle. It was a physical manifestation of an industrial and philosophical chasm that Germany, for all its engineering genius, had failed to bridge. The lessons learned from this humble machine would be hard-won, paid for in blood and shattered pride, but they would, eventually, reshape the very nature of military logistics and design for decades to come. By 1944, the war had turned irrevocably against Germany. The relentless hammer blows from east and west were shattering the Reich's industrial capacity and bleeding its manpower dry. Yet, even amidst the retreat and desperation, the lessons of the Jeep continued to resonate, a bitter refrain in the minds of those who understood the mechanics of war. The Allied forces, spearheaded by the United States and Great Britain, employed the Jeep with a versatility that astounded German observers. It wasn't just a transport, it was a force multiplier. Airborne troops dropped with Jeeps attached to parachutes, giving them instant mobility on landing zones. Special forces units, like the British SAS and American Rangers, used heavily armed Jeeps for deep penetration raids, striking behind enemy lines with lightning speed, and then vanishing. They mounted machine guns, anti-tank rifles, and even light artillery on these diminutive platforms, turning them into mobile fire bases that could appear, strike, and disappear before the Germans could effectively respond. Obersturmführer Erich Schmidt, a veteran of the fighting in Italy, watched a column of American Jeeps speed past a bogged-down Panzer IV on a propaganda film reel. The Panzer, a magnificent piece of engineering, was a slow, lumbering beast on the narrow, winding Italian roads, often delayed by bridges unable to support its weight or hairpin turns it couldn't navigate. The Jeeps, meanwhile, zipped around obstacles, navigated goat paths, and bypassed entire German defensive positions through sheer agility. "They are like fleas," Schmidt grumbled to his adjutant, Hauptmann Werner Gross. "Everywhere, impossible to squash, and incredibly irritating." Werner, a man who had seen his share of supply lines choked by broken-down trucks, nodded grimly. "More than irritating, Herr Obersturmführer. They are efficient. Our engineers strive for the ultimate weapon, the perfect machine. They," he gestured to the film, "build 1,000 small disposable tools that, collectively, achieve more." This distinction was crucial. German industrial strategy aimed for qualitative superiority. A few Tiger tanks, it was believed, could hold off many Shermans. A precise Messerschmitt Bf 109 could outmaneuver a dozen hurricanes. This ethos extended to their utility vehicles. A Kettenkrad was an incredible piece of engineering for towing in rough terrain, but it was complex, expensive, and slow to produce. A Schwimmwagen was an ingenious amphibious vehicle, but again, highly specialized and not suitable for mass deployment as a general-purpose vehicle. The Jeep, by contrast, embodied the Allied strategy of quantitative superiority coupled with robust functionality. It wasn't the best at any one thing, but it was good enough at everything, and there were millions of them. By the end of the war, over 65,000 Jeeps had been produced. Compare that to the mere 8,300 Quabelwagen or 15,000 Kettenkrads. The sheer numbers alone presented a logistical and tactical challenge that the Germans simply couldn't match. The German High Command, recognizing the Jeep's undeniable utility, did attempt to develop similar vehicles or adapt their own designs. But their entrenched industrial philosophy proved to be a formidable barrier. One such attempt was the Volkswagen Type 166 Schwimmwagen, an amphibious vehicle based on the Kubelwagen chassis. While an impressive feat of engineering, capable of traversing both land and water, it was far more complex and costly to produce than the Jeep. Its unique sealing requirements, propeller drive, and intricate gearbox made it a specialized item, not a mass-produced utility vehicle. It highlighted the German tendency to over-engineer, even when attempting a simpler concept. Another example was the growing demand for a light, four-wheel drive vehicle. German engineers, tasked with this, often started with existing components, trying to integrate four-wheel drive into a chassis designed for rear-wheel drive. The result was often a compromise, a heavier, more complex adaptation rather than a clean sheet design focused on simplicity. Their factories, geared for producing specific models with unique parts, struggled to pivot to the concept of universal interchangeability. Imagine a design meeting in a German automotive factory, sometime in 1943. A team of engineers, with decades of experience in crafting sophisticated engines and precise transmissions, are presented with a captured Jeep. "We need something like this," the lead engineer, Herr Dr. Schmidt, declares, pointing to the Jeep. Simple, rugged, four-wheel drive, fast to produce. One of his junior engineers, eager to impress, speaks up. "Doctor, we could adapt the Kubelwagen chassis. We could design a new front axle for four-wheel drive, perhaps integrate a power takeoff from the existing gearbox. It would require retooling of the front end, of course, and a strengthened frame. But it would be based on existing components, which should speed production." Dr. Schmidt nods, considering. "Good. And the engine? The current air-cooled unit is excellent, but for true off-road power, perhaps a new, more powerful unit, water-cooled for better thermal management? We could design a new four-cylinder with overhead camshafts. And so, the familiar cycle would begin. Every simplification would invariably lead to a new layer of complexity. A new engine meant new tooling, new spare parts. A new front axle meant specific components, not interchangeable with the rear. The ingrained habit of striving for engineered excellence, even in a utilitarian vehicle, prevented them from embracing the brutal simplicity of the Jeep. They could not conceive of designing a vehicle where parts were intentionally made less precise to ensure universal fit, where robustness was prioritized over refinement. This inability to adapt was not a failure of individual engineers. It was a systemic flaw in the German industrial and military-industrial complex. Their system was not designed for the sheer, brutal scale of mass production that the Americans mastered. German factories, while efficient, often retained elements of bespoke manufacturing, where skilled craftsmen played a significant role. American factories were designed for pure volume, with assembly lines optimized for speed and interchangeability, manned by workers who might only perform one or two simple tasks. The implications were profound. For the Allies, a damaged Jeep could be repaired by swapping entire components, engine, gearbox, axle in a few hours. Spare parts flowed like water from vast depots. For the Germans, a damaged vehicle often meant a protracted wait, or worse, abandoning it entirely. The spares problem became a constant, debilitating headache for the Wehrmacht, a problem exacerbated by their own design philosophy. Klaus Richter, now a weary but still observant Feldwebel in a repair company on the Rhine in early 1945, watched the endless stream of Allied vehicles, trucks, tanks, and an almost comical number of jeeps roll past. The war was clearly lost. He saw American mechanics, barely older than boys, confidently working on their jeeps, tools clanking, parts being swapped with ease. He recalled Hans Vogel's words years ago about the Jeep being agricultural. Now, he understood the true power of that term. Agriculture was about raw utility, about tools that had to work day in and day out, with minimal fuss and maximum resilience, often in harsh conditions. It was about practicality over prestige. The German war machine, built on a foundation of engineering pride and meticulous craftsmanship, had met its match not in a superior tank or a more powerful aircraft, but in a humble, unpretentious utility vehicle. The Jeep, in its millions, represented a different kind of genius, the genius of simplicity, mass production, and unbreakable resilience. It was a silent testament to an industrial philosophy that, in the crucible of total war, proved to be far more effective than all the precision and theoretical perfection that German engineering could muster. The lessons were etched in the minds of the surviving German engineers and military strategists. After the war, as Germany began to rebuild its shattered industries, the influence of the American pragmatic approach would be undeniable. Future German military vehicles, and indeed much of their post-war automotive industry, would incorporate elements of standardization, modularity, and ease of maintenance that had been so conspicuously absent in their wartime designs. The ghost of the Jeep, the little devil, would haunt their drawing boards, a constant reminder that sometimes the most effective solution is not the most complex, but the most simply, robustly, and ubiquitously available. It was a humiliation, yes, but also a profound, albeit painful, education.